On day 16, after looking at the sea lion some, we'll leave our hotel in Astoria and drive over to the Fort Clatsop Lewis and Clark National Historic Site. Then we'll drive down the coast to Seaside, see the aquarium, and go to our hotel for the night. At the aquarium, we'll be joined by my brother and his wife. Let's look at the sea lions out on the docks a little bit before we go. Now it's time to head on over to Fort Clatsop. We'll have to drive back through Astoria to get there. As we head out over the mouth of the Columbia River, we start to get into a lot of fog. Soon we arrive at Fort Clatsop Lewis and Clark National Historic Park and get ready to look at the sights there.
In 1,000 feet, your destination will be on the left.
This is the end of the trip for Lewis and Clark on the Pacific Ocean. They came here and visited with the Indians and built a fort here called Fort Clatsop. We've now seen St. Louis in another trip, Fort Mandan in another trip, and now seeing Fort Clatsop. And we're going to be looking at this area, the Visitor Center and the fort exhibit itself. This is a pictorial map of their journeys. Looking outside, we see some moss-covered trees, and now it's time to head into the Visitor Center. Of course, when we get inside, we've got to do a little bit of shopping, and then we look around at some of the exhibits they have, such as Sacagawea's clothes and pictures of Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Here we have some of them reaching the Mandan village where they stopped for the first winter. When they got to the coast, they used canoes like this to get around. And here's a statue of the arrival. They have a lot of artwork here. Here's a picture of them at the salt makers camp, making salt from the ocean water, and here's a statue outside of Sacagawea and her child. Some more of that artwork shows them outside Fort Clatsop with Native Americans trading. and in building the fort itself here. A visit to Fort Clatsop from the inside. And this is a model that they have. And now it's time to head outside and to look at the fort itself. It's a replica, obviously. Let's head on into the fort and do some exploring. First, we'll look at this, the left side, where the enlisted men lived. We'll be looking at the barracks here for the enlisted men. As you can see, they had in here bunk beds for 8 people in each one of these rooms. Here's the second room. And here's the third room. They're all quite similar on that side. You can see the beds. Next, we'll stand in the back gate and look around the fort from that perspective. Here's the area we just visited, the front gate. And over here, we're going to be looking at the orderly room and the storeroom. After looking around the orderly room, we go over to look at the storeroom. This is in infrared because it was so dark in the room. Next up, we'll look at the captain's quarters. This is where Lewis and Clark lived, and this was where their office was and where they did most of their work. This and the next room were in infrared because it was so dark inside. Lastly, we'll go to Cabinot's room. This is where Cabinot and his wife Sacagawea and their child lived during their stay here. Outside the fort, there's an enactor. They're having a lot of children's groups come through, and he's telling them about how they live there.
In a little bit, so I was getting set up here, and what I'm going to teach the students about is all about the different sources of information that we use to learn about the Lewis and Clark story and what happened here 270 years ago. Because it's one thing to listen to a park ranger tell you all these things happened, but how would students actually know it? And so I'm going to introduce them to different sources, specifically material culture, and then we'll talk about the written word and the journals. And then we'll talk about storytelling.
Okay.
Clatsop and Chinook and other tribes have communicated the stories via oral tradition.
Now it's time to get back on the road and head to Seaside along the coast. The fog is burned off to a large extent in this area. When we reach Seaside, it's a little foggy right here along the coast. We're going to be heading to the Seaside Aquarium and looking there. As we're at the aquarium, we're joined by my brother, John, and his wife, who will be traveling with us for the next few days. Let's take a look at some of the animals found here. This time the giant Pacific octopus is awake and moving all around, so we get a good look at how he moves. This other octopus is also very active compared to what octopuses usually are, and we get a good view of him. They have a display of various salmon and rainbow trout that would be in this area, and so here's some of them. One of the main features is feeding the harbor seals. They have about a dozen in this little container, but there's more water out back. This is just where you feed them, and Deborah loves doing that. They do everything they can to attract your attention, from splashing to clapping their hands to try and get a fish. They say, where's mine? You used it all up, huh? So, well, you didn't give me any.
These guys must be back all the time. Just laying there and catching.
Throw him one. Here's one, Deborah. Once we leave Aquarium, we go to Catherine's Riverfront Inn, where we're going to be spending the night, and then go across the parking lot and eat at Dodger's Seafood Grill on the recommendation from the hotel. After we get back to the hotel, we take the elevator up, and on floor 2 we let Johnny and Shairyl off, and then we get trapped between floor 2 and 3 as the elevator just stops. We call the call button, and they are working to check it out, and it takes about 30 to 40 minutes for them to get it running again. And we get to our room, and this ends day 16.